Welcome on But Developer channel. My name is Dima. I'm working on website for music industry, and I know that you most likely don't write tests. I suspect that at interview you will ask the questions, do you write tests? And if you are taken to the team, you understood that there were no tests. This is my personal experience from more than 10 years of work and interviewing. Experience is also confirmed by all PHP developers with who I am maintain contact. Unfortunately, historically it happened that everyone perceived PHP as language for rapid development. This opinion created a whole generation of PHP developers who don't know how to write tests, afraid to write tests, or even worse, go to IT forums and shout that no one needs tests. And I was the same, in sense I was afraid and I did not know how to write tests. I did not write on the forums. And there wasn't even a commercial job where I could try to cover the code with tests. But I have been writing tests for more than 3 years and I am excited about it. Imagine that you are deploying and you know that you have been definitely not broken anything. Imagine that you can update the PHP version and all composer dependency and you sure that everything is okay. Or you solved a lot of Git conflicts and you know that you did not break the code, your own and the team's. So if you ask how it to write tests, I will answer awesomely, fucking awesomely. I need a pause here and clarify. Of course, tests do not give 100% guarantee, like everything in our life, but they minimize the chance that something went wrong. The fact that something went wrong will not be known by your lead. Your team will not find out, but you will find out at the development stage. I am emphasize, tests are not a substitute for manual quality control. A manual tester is an engaged person. Tester has not worked on the code for the past 2 weeks. He does know your problems, the cause and the decision you made. He will ask the right questions that you forgot to ask when develop something. Write down and standardize those things that the developers forgot about because there was something more important. That's why manual QA is important. Please do not skip it. And it is must be said that QA are cheaper than developers. You could come across posts by strange managers who are happy that they fired all manual QA team and force the developers to tests. There are only 2 options. Or it is such an incompetent manager that he could not calculate the difference between the QA and the developer salary, or he hired such bad developers that they are cheaper than a normal manual QA. I'm not talking about teams that can't afford QA. I'm talking about managers who are proud of it. And because I'm here, very often I see conflicts between the development team and the QA team. It gets to the point that QA are afraid to open bugs. I really do not understand how this happens, but I will say, if you are QA, please add all the bugs and improvements you see to the tickets. If you are a developer and you see that there are inadequate bugs from QA, send them to project manager. If PM said do this, fix this. If you do not agree so much, set the minimum priority and return to them never. That is all, no conflicts. Simple. So go back to the project. As you understand, I like tests. I will cover all my code with tests. For your information, testing the frontend is much more difficult than the backend. So we have 2 options for PHP. PHPUnit and Pest. And you know what? Select one of them and use it. That's all. Very simple choice. The difference is only in syntax. Pest is a functional syntax and PHPUnit classes and functions. That's all. Only one request from me. Please use one test engine for one project. The developer does not have to decide every time what syntax to use. I am choose PHPUnit not because I'm a fan, just because for the frontend I will use just like frameworks and their syntaxes is like in the past. So the neurons in my head won't go out. That's all. So the first rule and the first setup. For tests, use the same database as for work. No in-memory, no SQLite. I use Postgres and I will use Postgres for testing. It will save you from a huge pile of stupid work. If you use in-memory database, you will either stop using the database feature or overload code with if-else environment checks. As I use Docker and advise you, it will take 5 minutes to set up the test database. So, first one, for main DB service image option, I set a link $DB image. It will remember DB image name, PostGIS 16, 3, and etc. Next, I create DB test service image from the link DB image, container name, restart unless stopped, and environments. Credential inside environments. I can hardcode it is safely. Network DB network, maybe makes sense to add a new one, but not critical. And that's all. Not volumes, not open ports, just one tips for me. Not now, in the future you will get the problem. Tests will run in parallel and open too much connection to the database service, and also create too much transactions. So I advise you to increase the maximum number of allowed connections and transactions. Simple command, Postgres config max connections and max logs per transaction. Next, go to PHPUnit XML file and add or rewrite environments. First of all, I recommend use log channel str there, because tests write logs into your local machine. It is not useful. And next one, all database credential, what we hard-coded inside Docker Compose YAML file. Next one, go to test directory, test case abstract class. All your tests will extend this class. And use straight refresh database. It will run all your tests separately in transaction. This is the most productive way to isolate data in the single test. Of course, we can use this straight in the all test files and make some micro optimization for tests where we do not use database, but it is very rarely case. Next one, set privat bool drop types property to true. It will remove all your custom database types every time with refresh migration. It is very useful for Postgres. In a future video I will show many custom types. For example, enum is custom types in the Postgres. And that's all. It is full setup for running tests. For example, I will cover by tests 2 actions what I create in the previous video. And one simple tips if you use actions. Please do not afraid add an extra decorator to your action if it help you to write tests. In my case, check property health is a command. That's called a command, and Laravel doesn't know how to test it. We can mock all commands or no one. So I add decorator as object, use as object, and as fake, use as fake, and create unit test. Check property health test. First test should not call health check command by default. Artisan should receive call, it make mock for artisan call command with run health check command, and should run never. And check property health action make handle with no matter name, and the next test the same but can call health check command, so not never but once, and run action as object but with fresh parameter, fresh true. Run test right inside IDE and all good to test. Okay, one simple tips that will make your tests smooth and beautiful. One condition, one test. As you can see, I do not check action result in this test. Just one condition, if option fresh set or not set. That's all. But in the next tests, I want test can I get property status. First of all, I describe variables that can reuse property name, expected property status, health check enum, and OK. Also, when working with database, I always recommended creating a control record. This will allow you to make sure that you are not receive the first or the last record. So I describe control property name and control property status. Next one, set up health check result history item factory. I advise to run factory from model, but it is not my model, and the developers skip this possibility. So test should create 2 records, main and control, and run check property health as object twice. First one with property name and next one with control name. And the status should be equal with initial status. Next test. Next, I have to be sure that action return last property status, so test should create 3 records. 2 of them should have created add property in the past and 1 in the future. Also, good practice is insert future in the middle between 2 past records. It allows you to make sure that you use not ID but created add property. And of course not last record and not first record. And that's all. As a result, action should return last property status. Next test. Make sure that action will not die if not find some property, so do not create any records and expect a null result. And the last one should check if action can work with case-sensitive property. All code you can find by the link in description. My job for today is not to load you with unnecessary code, but show how to write simple, small tests using actions. Of course, all tests are running and work fine. And advice: to understand whether your test works, break the code it tests. Remove some condition, change the order by direction, or something similar. If the test does not fail, it is a bad test. And the last one for this section, I should cover by test as command behavior. And it is much more easy because handle method are fully tested. So I can mock it and fake return values. For fake, I use partial mock from as fake trait, and partial should receive handle with property name and fresh, should run once and return OK status. And Laravel construction, this artisan, command name, properties, expected output, and assert OK. The next 2 tests are the same, but handler should return null or not OK status. And that's all. I got fully tested action with 9 tests, each no more than 30 lines, and cognitive complexity less than 3. And now tell me that the tests are difficult. But if really difficult, for example, you use action as all possible decorator, just replace test by files. Use feature test for testing as controller and use separated files with prefix as command, as job, and etc. for every cases. But this situation is very rare. And for understanding Laravel structure, feature tests are integration tests. All tests where you call HTTP request are feature test. This get URL, get JSON, post JSON, all these are feature tests. Unit test should test some part, some separated class. And please do not test private methods, even if you find package for this. Private methods are implementations. We do not test the implementation. We test the functionality. Also, I should test check system health action and advice. If you have action as controller, most of your action will be as controller, and test logic are not difficult. You can limit action test to feature tests. No need to duplicate test for something you want to use. Remember, test also your code. It should be tested, it should have code style and should not duplicate it. And now about funny stuff. In the video about code complexity, I said that code coverage is not a very effective indicator, but it gamifies development, and there are very few such things, so I can recommend it to use it. And of course it is useful, it really tells you when something is not tested. And for test coverage, PHPUnit asks additional library, pcov or xdebug. Pcov is not supported as far as I know, so xdebug is our choice. And I got a problem here. Xdebug required 3 additional packages: autoconf, buildbase, and Linux headers. And there is an unpleasant moment in these things. I cannot put them as dev dependency for dev Docker image, because for the development I use a dev container, and if during development I install some packages that depends on these applications, I will not know about it, but it was die on production. Consistency disturbed, so I have to install this application for all dev and prod images, even if they are heavy. But you can say, just run test on production container. But I have a problem with this, because this library usually used for some specific tasks, for example for open Word files, and usually you don't test it, you just mock this behavior for your tests. So yeah, save it for all. But xdebug install only for dev container, and also we should add PHPUnit config xdebug mode set to coverage. I also recommend you to create many PHP config ini files for any reason. And of course, don't forget to copy it to the container. And now I can run PHP artisan test coverage and see all files coverage, but without modules directory. So I have to go into PHPUnit XML file and add one new block, source, with two sections, include and exclude. Inside include, I will write modules. Inside exclude, I'm going to exclude routes, test, and database. Also, I remove app directory from include. If I will write something here, I will go back it. So I can run test coverage command again and see that my modules directory covered by test on 98%. PHPUnit test coverage have many options for setting result. One of them to HTML. And please know that test coverage requires a lot of time and resources. So please run only for a specific directory or module in my case. So I generate test coverage result into HTML format to reports directory. Open index file and I can see full report for my test coverage code. What line are tested or not tested. In my case, just one line. This line prevent double routing cache, but HTML report is not useful. If you use PHP Storm on test directory, right click, more run debug and run test PHPUnit with coverage. And you can see test coverage percentage in the project panel, and all lines are green or red inside code block. Green covered by test, red not covered by test. The same line as in HTML report. This line should not be tested. I think it will be overtest. And if you want to see 100%, just disable code coverage for this line. Code coverage ignore start and code coverage ignore end. Restart code coverage command and all green, 100% for all files. Cool. And all I had to do was added test to CI scripts. First of all, I recommend you to wrap run test command to composer script or composer command if you want. It's allow me to add some pre-test commands, for example, clear config from official Laravel documentation. Next, I recommend run your test parallel. This will speed them up a lot, and use stop on fail and stop on error options. This will allow you to get information about the fail test immediately without waiting for all the tests to run. You have got a lot of tests. Also, for parallel test, we should install simple composer dev dependency, paratest. And I advise you to set up test runs to the pre-push git hook. This will reduce the load of the build server, and in fact, this is very comfort solution for developers. The boss doesn't see the fuck-ups, because almost all fuck-ups will stay on the local machine. And of course, I have to run tests on the server as part of CI script. And inside internet, you can find a beautiful solution with separated step where you install composer dependency only once and use it in the next jobs. For example, test and code style analysis run in parallel on separated jobs. And all looks great, but in a real world, composer dependency weight less than 100 megabyte. But Docker images and Docker containers is very heavy, and AppIt is very heavy operation. So in my experience, it's much faster to run the test sequentially after the code style analyzer in the same container, app container once and install composer dependency also once. So I rename job to test, run test database container and run tests. Yes, I know it is not so beautiful, I got much more less green circles, but it is really fast. And then there is advice that you will not see anywhere. I advise as part of the tests run migration rollback and seeds. I talk about migrate down commands, and I know that there is a practice to not write them, but I am a fan. I like write them. I want to have possibility rollback some migration, and I understand the situation where this is not possible. And of course, you can skip this step if you want. but I'm strongly recommended to write seeds. It is very useful for onboarding new employee, and of course it's useful for you if you switch your work machine. But no one tests seeds and usually forgot to support it. So if we run it as part of deploy, this will enable us to keep them up to date. One moment here. For run this migration, we should have test environment file with a database configuration, test database credentials. And important, do not name it testing, just test. Or you can call any name but not testing. Testing will rewrite PHPUnit config. And this is all. Test runs, we can use it. And a couple of words about MVP. But first, please support Ukraine. Russians want to make the whole world life as bloody as they do. They are trying to kill me and everyone I love. So please don't believe Russian propaganda and support Ukraine. Thank you. So about MVP, the first thing you should know is that support is much more expensive than development from scratch. Much more expensive. New feature, bug fix and etc. much more expensive. This is true story that many customers do not understood. And try to suggest how many times I have done a successful MVP, a sub, without testing, without database, without any code style and etc. And when MVP declare successful, how many times I was allowed to rewrite it normally from scratch? Zero times. And now you are responsible for a project where core feature made of shit, and when you say that it should be rewritten, the project manager will come to you, client will come to you, all management will come to you and say, man, make just a simple feature, 1 day, 2 days, not matter, client have a money, after that you will have a time to rewrite it, okay, one simple feature, just make it, please, you can do it, man, not so bad, all in production, work, and believe me, you will do it. Because they are managers for a reason, and there are many of them. And welcome to slavery on a shitty project. You won't be able to pass this project to another developer because it is embracing and no one wants to, and you will be able to leave the project only when you are freed. Or the client will fire you because you are slow, have many bugs and so on. But first he will suck your soul. So, one rule, do MVP in the right way. Immediately cover with tests. Set up static code analysis, set up code styles, and etc. Think about future of the project. Don't let anyone mess with this project. It will take a maximum of 30% more time. If the customer has no resources at this time, he will fail in any way, not because of you, but you will change your future from a slave of dirty project to a technical lead of perfect project with best practices. And your client will save money because support will much more cheaper. Win-to-win condition. And of course about MVP of my project. I do not believe that my project will success in a parts. I follow the competitors and I believe that there are no great successes because of small functionality. And if you are sure that it is impossible to start without MVP, I don't agree. For me, this is the same as saying that the developers of Skyrim should have released a MVP with, I don't know, chicken. But I will release the separated part of the project as soon as I can. So not everything is terrible. Thank you, goodbye.